We are barreling rapidly towards the supposed drop-dead date, which is June 1st. I'll tell you a little bit more about there are some questions over whether they could push that out further, but we'll get to that in a minute. For now, let's say June 1st is when you actually run out of money and have to start making choices about what you pay, when you actually go into default, when you have all of these potentially catastrophic consequences that we are all concerned about. So Jake Sherman had some reporting yesterday from an internal Republican House caucus meeting. He's got some details here about what they are saying amongst themselves. Go ahead and put this up on the screen. Speaker McCarthy just told House Republicans, he says, inside a closed House GOP meeting, "I need you all to hang with me on the debt limit." Quote, "We are nowhere near a deal yet." Very confidence-inspiring. He goes on to say, put this next piece up, Colvin, "I told the president 3 things. No clean debt limit, no raising taxes, spend less money. Remember where we were. They refused to negotiate. We owe Garrett Graves and Patrick McHenry, they're the ones who've been negotiating, a round of applause. They made a mistake," he's talking about the Democrats, "to not negotiate. Let's say stay strong together." He goes on to say McCarthy showed a video with a chronology of Democrats saying they wouldn't negotiate, so their own little like propaganda piece to say, look, we rolled them, they already caved, which, you know, hard to deny that that's the case.
Yep.
And then another important note here, put this next piece up on the screen, Colvin. McCarthy got back up from the right in the closed House GOP meeting. Gates said McCarthy's tone was pitch perfect, and Scott Perry also concurred. So that shows a sort of unified Republican House caucus in terms of the demands that they were making. One thing I'll point out here, I mean, saying no raising taxes, that's an issue for Democrats. And it is very hard to see how this all gets resolved because the ground that Republicans have staked out and that they sort of have to stake out in order to remain unified, since you have the House Freedom Caucus taking relatively extreme positions, is wildly unacceptable to Democrats. So they have not only called for, in nominal terms, not just accounting for inflation, but in nominal terms, they want spending cuts. That makes it, very aggressive cuts. They also want to increase the budget for the military. They want to cut spending to the IRS, which actually puts a further hole in the budget because IRS agents help to bring in additional revenue. And so you've left yourself this very limited pool of funds, of programs that you can cut, and that would require really dramatic cuts, not only to social safety net programs, but also to what has been Biden's signature program, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to be a really red line for him, also for, House Democrats, for Senate Democrats. So, and as he mentions here, they're not putting any taxes on the table. There was also reporting about Biden was saying, hey, let's work into this, like negotiating more prescription drug prices. McCarthy was like, nah, we don't want to do anything that's actually good in this whole situation. So they put that off the table. They don't want to close the carried interest loophole. They certainly don't want to roll back any of the Trump tax cuts that largely went to wealthy and corporations. So even though they continue to talk, I just don't know how they actually find some sort of meeting of the minds here that's going to be acceptable.
Oh, I don't think there's any way. But although Mitch McConnell did say yesterday, everybody calm down. They're going to come to a deal, which was fairly interesting because the can has really been kicked over to McCarthy. McConnell has really taken a back seat.
Yeah, McConnell's like, all right, dude, good luck.
And McConnell was out and injured through a lot of this. He was in the hospital, or he was back in Kentucky because he had a fall. But Kevin McCarthy took the reins on this. And if he were a Democrat, the glowing profiles of how he has held his conference together, despite having this insanely slim majority where people have no incentive really to get along with him because they can, if you're the Freedom Caucus, even if you're the moderates, you can do so much stuff on your own and message on your own and not be unified. And that could still end up happening.
Yeah.
We can't, count the chickens before they hatch because that's very much still possible. But the level of unity in a very divided conference, in a very difficult situation, one thing that I have heard from Republican circles and especially Freedom Caucus circles is that they think that a lot of these differences were ironed out during the speaker battle in January. And so when they came to loggerheads then and fought so bitterly over whether Kevin McCarthy would be the speaker, they kind of figured out how to get along. And that's helping them now. Again, this could still blow up in everyone's face, but I've been scratching my head and trying to figure out why on earth Joe Biden ever came to the table from a purely strategic standpoint. Like the moral and ideological questions aside, it makes absolutely no sense that he started negotiating because there is an impasse. Bottom line, there's no compromise.
His whole position has been the worst of all worlds in terms of just any sort of trying to get strategic leverage. If you were going to negotiate from the beginning, you should have just negotiated from the beginning. The worst thing you could do is say absolutely no negotiations and then completely cave and negotiate. In my opinion, what they should have done from the beginning is continue to hold out the very clear possibility of 14th Amendment or some other workaround, because that really signals to them like, listen, we don't have to give you anything. And, also in my opinion, they should actually exercise one of these options so we never have to deal with this nonsense again, which is truly dangerous and potentially catastrophic. I mean, people can lose their jobs. Like millions of people could lose their jobs. You could have the whole global financial system completely collapse, really damaging to America's standing in the world. Treasury bonds are used to backstop like every big corporate transaction around the world. So this is really dangerous stuff that they're playing with here. And not only that, but Democrats could have lifted the debt ceiling on their own back when they had control, before they lost the House, and they just didn't do it. That, to me, in terms of, they can't see 3 inches in front of their faces. And they were so worried about giving the Republicans some talking point about like, oh, Democrats love debt, that they've now risked the entire global financial economy. I mean, listen, Republicans are the hostage takers, so they're to blame in my view. But Democrats just never are able to strategize effectively and actually get out from under these problems. And I think part of it is not just that they didn't want to give Republicans a talking point. I think part of it is also that they sort of calculated that this would be bad for the Republican Party, the specter of them holding them hostage and all of that. And based on the polling, it's not clear that the messaging is even working out for them. But, I think politicians on both sides sort of like these kinds of crises because they think they can leverage them for their own political end. And it's really grotesque.
So great point. And particularly one thing I think is genuinely worth thinking about if you're sitting at the DNC right now is how incredibly their advantage with the media has started to become a disadvantage in ways that they don't anticipate. Because if you go back to the Obama years, which are heavy on everyone's mind, Dan Pfeiffer writing about it in the New York Times recently, those negotiations really went poorly for the Tea Party Republicans, who felt like they had the wind at their back and were doing great and giving the voters what they wanted, and they were going to come out on top because this was the libertarian moment, as Time had on their cover. It did not work out that way, and in large part because the media heavily sided with Democrats, and on government shutdown stuff, average voters hate that. If you're someone who maybe leans right, votes Republican sometimes, votes Democrat sometimes, aren't paying super close attention to the news, what you're going to instinctively hate is the government not working, like things just not happening, and people holding stuff hostage for ideological reasons. You don't care. You want things to work, and you're disappointed when they don't. And so that's a built-in disadvantage to being obstructionist, period, even if there are ideological reasons that justify it. You have a huge problem if you're Republicans. Democrats know that. They know that the media is going to take their side at the end of the day. They know instinctively there's independent voters. People just really don't like when government stops. And that, I think, gave them a false sense of confidence that they could basically do whatever they wanted, start negotiating, say, listen, Republicans are screwing this up. They don't want to work out a deal, and the media is going to take their side, which is true, but it doesn't mean that it shows any leadership and is any healthier for the country when you could have just done the damn thing, before this all happened. And you could have just not negotiated, and Republicans can't do anything about it if you don't negotiate.
Well, and here's the other thing. By Biden caving, he has basically given credence to the Republican claim that the debt is a real issue right now that needs to be dealt with. And that's why you see a lot of polling that people are like, yeah, we want a debt ceiling increase, but with spending cuts. Well, when you have both political parties basically saying like, all right, we should negotiate and we should have some sort of spending cuts, caving into that narrative, of course you're going to end up with people wanting them to have some sort of a deal because you're not getting any other messaging from anywhere else. When the reality is there's no sign in the market that we are close to any sort of a debt catastrophe. Interest rates were, low and still remain relatively low by historical standards, even in spite of the Federal Reserve hiking interest rates. There were no issues with like selling our debt. There was no indication in the market that this was a looming problem. And there's also no indication that Republicans actually care about this issue because they obviously blew up our debt and deficit with the Trump tax cuts, which they are adamantly committed to and have no intention of rolling back. This only becomes an issue when it's Democrats who are in power. So I think there's a lot of foolishness here all around, but the catastrophic error for Democrats was not dealing with this when they had complete power and when they could have. There was another weird thing that happened in the Republican caucus meeting that we wanted to highlight for you. Put this up on the screen. They did a 15-minute fundraising auction for some used chapstick from Speaker McCarthy. Don't know. Okay. Whatever, that's kind of gross. Marjorie Taylor Greene apparently won. Her winning bid was $100,000. This goes to like Republican campaign efforts. He also threw in there that he would attend a dinner with donors and supporters for whoever wins. So congratulations, Marjorie. I think we have a picture of her with her chapstick that she won. Apparently the flavor, according to some in-depth reporting here, is cherry. So there you go. That also happened. Let's put this next piece up on the screen. Manu Raju, this is what I was referring to earlier. Biden tried to add in a provision to the debt talks to expand Medicare's authority to negotiate drug prices. This is one of those things that everybody pretends to be in favor of, but then it never actually happens because of the power of big pharma. And McCarthy said that seems like a place to try and disrupt the whole negotiations, like trying to throw taxes in, now try to start talking about Medicare. So he comes out there in favor of keeping prices high for Medicare and, you know, gouging the government. That's why it makes sense to put in here if you're talking about cutting spending. One thing that would cut spending is if Medicare could negotiate with drug makers on the cost of prescriptions. You could save some dollars there, but no, we'll just keep giving the premium to big pharma.
Yeah, and you know, I actually am ideologically more concerned about debt and deficit. I think, you know, the financial management of the United States is find it genuinely problematic. But the things Republicans and Democrats to some extent are picking to have fights over are incredibly stupid. And I really thought that this would be an opportunity, just like hearing some of the chatter in GOP circles, an opportunity to start taking on the surveillance state, to start taking on some absolutely ridiculous, like excessive, culturally like radical stuff that's been baked into the federal government from a conservative perspective that I think most people would probably object to. It's none of that. That's not where any of this fight has gone. Like ridiculous Pentagon programs. Why aren't they fighting about that stuff?
No, they want to give the Pentagon more money.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, how about all of these things? We're seeing all these like offices, like Ken Klippenstein reports on a new one every week that nobody knew existed at the Pentagon and just exists to surveil average Americans for the partisan purposes of the intelligence community. Why aren't they picking fights over that? That's worth shutting down the government, basically. Like, if anything is, that's worth it. There are just other things that would make so much more sense. And people who were doing, like, crunching some numbers, Russ Vought, his former OMB director under Trump, put together a budget of things that actually really, I thought were worth fighting over. And I'm not hearing much of that on the messaging side. And I think part of that is because when Biden started negotiating, it's an impasse, and you can't, if you're actually trying to find legitimate places for compromise, it's not going to be any of that.
Yeah. Well,
None of that
took,
stuff.
I mean, I'm glad they did, but they took Social Security and Medicare off the table, maybe accidentally, in the Biden State of the Union. And they took the Pentagon off the table and, in fact, want to increase funding at the Pentagon. That doesn't leave a whole lot left. And so it's like, okay, you're risking the whole global economy for some, like, additional work requirements on SNAP?
Yes.
Really? Really?
Yes.
My other question for you, Emily, is I have also been surprised that they've been able to keep the Republican caucus together as well as they have. I was frankly surprised they were able to, as easily as they did, pass their bill through the House. My question is, what happens when the markets crash? Mm-hmm. What happens when the Wall Street donors start actually freaking out and calling members of the Republican House caucus? That's when, to me, the rubber sort of hits the road in terms of whether they have any defections and whether they have anyone who's open to, say, for example, the discharge petition that Democrats are floating, where you need 5 Republicans to sign on to get that through the House. Do you think that you start to see cracks emerge then? Because even though you got Matt Gaetz giving McCarthy backup in this Republican House caucus meeting yesterday, he also then went and told reporters, I don't think we should be negotiating at all.
Right.
I think our position should be what we passed passed in the House, and that's it, end of story. There have been other Republicans who are on record being like, I will not vote for raising the debt ceiling no matter what.
Yep.
So do you think that you could have cracks emerge there in the unity of the Republican caucus when, if, and I would say it's more likely to when, you have a massive market crash and Wall Street starts to freak?
They're incredibly vulnerable. I think they're in a better position than they would be under any other potential speaker with Kevin McCarthy, because he is so intentional. I mean, the real lesson from the Marjorie Taylor Greene chapstick auction, which, by the way, we will be auctioning off Sagar's chapstick at the end of the show.
Taking all bidders.
And it is used. But no, the real story there is a year ago, most of the establishment press would have said how absurd it is that Marjorie Taylor Greene, in a really bitter potential shutdown battle over the debt ceiling, is actually so chummy with Kevin McCarthy that they're auctioning off chapstick in the middle of it, and she's happy to make the winning $100,000 bid. That is very unusual compared to where the Republican establishment and the Tea Party movement were, the Freedom Caucus movement were under Barack Obama, even under Paul Ryan. And so they're in the best possible situation with Kevin McCarthy because he's very intentional about courting those disparate sort of factions of his party, and he's good at it. He's actually pretty good at it. Politico ran a story last year that was just, "Is Kevin McCarthy dumb?" You remember that headline?
No.
Oh my gosh. Again, like, he actually is not. He's very good at this, and so if there's any hope of preventing that, it's because of Kevin McCarthy. But at the same time, there's just not a lot of incentive on the Freedom Caucus part to play nice when the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. And Kevin McCarthy's getting calls from Wall Street donors. People are freaking out. That's where things, you're right, are going to get really tough, because the Freedom Caucus is not beholden to those people. It's not beholden to the same sort of corporate donor set, especially not now, that they were in the past.
Well, you have the Freedom Caucus group, which benefits personally, you know, in terms of their like grassroots and online support, the more strident they are.
Yes.
Right? The more extreme, the more willing to blow things up they are. Then you have this new crop of Republicans elected in districts that Joe Biden won in places like New York.
Yeah.
And their incentives are very different, right? They want to get reelected. They want to show to their districts, I'm different than those crazy people. I'm the type of like reasonable Republican who just wants some fiscal responsibility in this joint. And so they, you know, if you do have that kind of crash, those disparate incentives may come to the fore, but we'll see how that all goes. There's one other piece here. You know, I keep saying I really don't know how this is going to be resolved. I don't even have a guess at this point how this is going to be figured out, because it's just very hard for me to see how the White House and the Republicans come to a deal. The White House seems to have put any of the extraordinary measures like 14th Amendment kind of off the table, although they still have technically kept those as live options. Jeff Stein reports on what is another effort here to at least kick the can down the road a little bit. Put this up on the screen from Jeff. He's got a scoop that Treasury has asked U.S. agencies if any payments can be made at a later date as the deadline nears. So according to an internal memo that was obtained by the Washington Post, Biden aides are searching for new ways to prolong the X date beyond existing measures, sources say. So the X date right now is June 1. And the idea here, Emily, is if they can actually push out till June 15, there's a bunch of quarterly tax payments that will flow into government coffers. Then they would be able to stay alive for a while longer and push this off even further down the road. Now, it's the technicalities here are tricky. It's not obvious that they could actually make this work. Go ahead and put the next part from Jeff up on the screen. I think we have a couple more tweets from him. He says if they can find a few days worth of extra cash, they can make it to June 15. Then they get a whole bunch of new tax revenue. Obviously, that's not the preferred outcome to punt the deadline to July, but that would at least buy them some more time. They say despite the attention to legally novel arguments around minting the coin and the 14th Amendment, there's a key separate set of options also likely controversial to simply delay the date rather than simply end the standoff, as those ideas do. And then he puts in parentheses, don't you love the idea of doing this for longer? I think Jeff is also set to get married, so I'm sure he would love having to follow this while he's like, you know, on his wedding day and on his honeymoon, whatever. But anyway, there's a lot of technical questions whether they can actually do this, because there's government regulations about like, hey, you gotta like pay your bills on time, federal government, and you can't you are also sort of usurping some of the power of Congress if you are picking and choosing what bills get paid and what bills don't get paid. So there are some questions around whether this strategy would be feasible or legal. But as of now, I think to me what this shows is they really don't have a clear plan about how to work this out. And now they're like, well, maybe our best bet is just to like kick this down the road. So maybe we can come up with a plan that might ultimately work out.
They're just going like full Jackson Pollock, like throwing things onto the canvas, seeing what it looks like. No, I mean, it's like, I actually think that's arguably the worst approach, is saying we have this potential stopgap. We can keep kicking it down, because that's again what they did from last year. They could have done this last year. It's easier. They have a recess coming up that might have to be abridged if they end up needing to come back to DC and vote on negotiations. As silly as that sounds, that is a motivation for members of Congress. Would be shocked to learn they don't like to have that stuff interrupted. So all of those things going on. I mean, the incentive to not figure this out and make a decision, whether it's saying we're at an impasse, we can't compromise, we're going this way or that way, the incentive to do that sooner rather than later is really important, because otherwise I think that's where you get into a dangerous situation. If you can't figure it out now, you're not going to figure it out in 2 weeks. I mean, it's just going to continue to get worse, and whatever deal you come to is going to continue to get worse in the next 2 weeks. I think there's a little measure of truth to what Mitch McConnell says, that like something's going to get done. It's probably going to be bad for both Republicans and Democrats. He may be much more optimistic that it's going to be good for Republicans than it ultimately is. But whatever deal they come to avoid default, I don't think that's actually going to happen. But crazier things have happened, I guess. The host of Celebrity Apprentice was our president for a few years.
I remember that.
Remember that?
I remember that.
Things can spiral. But all that is to say, if you keep punting, you're going to further lose your ability to do something that actually makes sense. Because if you can't do it now, you're not going to do it now.
I agree with you. You kind of need the nothing happens in D.C. until there's a hard deadline.
Right.
And you kind of need the forcing mechanism. And also, I mean, we're about to talk about the economy. Like, the longer that this hangs over everybody, I think the worse it is all the way around. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now. And Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.